some fantasy outlooks, Bo Brock, for this team and maybe what it says and doesn't say about the statistical add-ups for the regular season. We've got a tremendous graphic, and let's start. Where do you want to start? Because I think some of these are telling to where people believe the Cardinals are going to be at in 2023. But the bell cow, obviously, is James Conner, because who else do the Cardinals have in the backfield?
Right. Yeah. Let's take a look at James Conner, the first Cardinal you should maybe look at drafting if you're getting into fantasy football. And James Conner had 868 rushing yards. This is per ESPN Fantasy. These are their projections. 8 total touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns with 1 receiving, 43 catches for 294 yards. So you would have another over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, and he would have another season where he's approaching, double-digit tutties. This seems low to me with what, I think that this organization is setting up for Conner to have a huge workload. Now, I think they had him just over 200 carries on this. I just think that it's probably going to be north of that if he can stay healthy. And I know that's the big knock on Conner, but I mean, if he gets as many opportunities as we think he's going to get, like, I think these numbers, I think he blows these out of the water.
Well,
and that's a good season.
I mean, yeah, I think they're projecting him not to stay healthy by these numbers. Because
yeah, I mean,
if he plays 17 games, he's going to sleepwalk to 1,000 yards. In 17 games, it's like 55 yards rushing a game.
Yeah.
Does anybody see, like, look what they did Friday night? They wanted desperately to run the football, just no one really was effective. Like, that's going to be their MO. They're going to be able to run, work off a play action, boot Kyler out when he comes back. But I think that's ESPN saying, like, you're going to get like 12 games out of James Conner, because I think he hits that easily, if not more so. If you play 17 games, you're looking at somebody that's going to be, I think, in contention for like a Pro Bowl berth, his best statistical year. Like, the touchdowns are irrelevant to me because that's predicated on the Cardinal offense doing well outside of James Conner. But from a yardage standpoint, like, maybe the receiving, right around 300 seems about right, because I don't know how much they're going to throw to their backs, but north and south where James Conner thrives, he's gonna hit 1,000 yards. He will sleepwalk his way 1,000 yards. And can Keontae Ingram clean up some of that mess? I don't know.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen.
He's going to have, especially with Colt McCoy under center, like he's going to be an integral part in this offense, and especially in the pass game. And we've seen Colt McCoy and him, connect for some big screen.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that stands out, the San Francisco one, when he took it to the house, I think it was 40 plus yards. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm sure they have some sort of formula where they take, as far as what he averages, how many games he plays in, and they're just basing it off of that. But it's really strange. But he's got 26 total touchdowns in his 2 seasons with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, it is crazy. I know you can look at the team and say, hey, there's not a lot of options here, but the guy's been so productive. He's been money in the bank close to the goal line. They're going to get their opportunities. And, like, just look at the 2-point conversion that they ran. They ran the ball. Like, they're going to run the ball when they're that close all the time.
How much will they go to that well, though?
Right.
Like, will they be tempted, like, 2 weeks in, if he has like 60 touches in 2 weeks, and they're just like, this isn't sustainable. And that's always been my argument.
Isn't he that Tercel, though? Isn't he that 92 Tercel where you just rack up the miles at this point? I mean, you're paying him a premium. You're paying him a lot of money for a running back. He's 27? He's going to be 28 or whatever. I mean, don't you just rack up the mileage?
Like, you say that, but then it's like, then when Colt McCoy can't throw every third day, like, what are we doing here? One guy gets a plan and somebody else can't.
I don't think we're going to see Conner in the preseason. I just don't. I don't.
No. Yeah. I just mean, like, Colt McCoy, they're setting out with a management plan that's hopefully not going to span more than 4 games at most. Whereas, like, James Conner, like, he's going to be a piece of the offense ideally for 17 weeks until early January. Like, I don't. Where they're going right now offensively, you need a second back. You need a third back too. But, like, this team, the perfect world is what James Conner had with Chase Edmonds 2 years ago when it was like 60-40. That's how he was able to stay fresh and have the kind of year he had.
He still got hurt.
Yeah. I just, who's that complimentary back? I don't think he's on the team yet. And maybe he's never on the team. But big week, low key this week against Kansas City to see who steps up in this backfield, because right now nobody is taking the baton. The receiver game is a little bit different. We've talked about Michael Wilson. I don't want to start there. I want to start with Hollywood Brown, the assumed Wide
We
receiver
we
one.
got all our wide receivers together here.
Okay, in a special graphic.
We did, yeah. So this is the trio that they have as the top most productive wideouts for the Arizona Cardinals in 2023. Hollywood Brown, 75 catches for 971 yards, 4 touchdowns. Got Rondale Moore. So probably a down season for Hollywood, but then you look at Rondale Moore and you talk about health. Like would be a healthy season for Rondale Moore. I would sign up right now for this season from Rondale Moore. 70 catches for 737 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then I'm not that down on this season for Michael Wilson. I think that this is a productive season for a third round rookie. 43 catches for 511 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think that he can eclipse that easily, but I'm not mad at these. The Hollywood one is a little concerning. The other two I would probably take.
I mean, the Hollywood one, let's start with that, is a coin flip. Does he get 1,000 yards or not? And I think that is solely predicated on does Kyler Murray come back sooner rather than
Look
later.
at that chain, by the way, on this graphic. My God.
I mean, the new jerseys look fantastic on Hollywood Brown. He looks great in that new color scheme.
Primetime Jet is his social handle, but look, it's just this iced out jet that he's got on his chain.
Here's what I will say. It's a pretty big indictment on Hollywood Brown if he plays all season with or without Kyler and he can't get 1,000 yards. Again, I think they'll scheme him up. I'm not concerned about that. This is a concern with Rondale Moore. No way this happens. No. I'm going to tell you right now, Greg Dortch and Zach Pascal will take a big segment of this. 737 yards for Rondale Moore when his career high is in the 4s, like 430 last year. I think Rondale Moore can be productive. I think his numbers are more in line, I think, with what Michael Wilson is projected to have. And I'm not saying Michael Wilson's going to have 737 yards. I'm saying there's going to be about 3 to 4 guys on this team that are all playing in the same sandbox of like between 400 and 600 yards. I think Hollywood's going to be the standout. And then where Michael will solidify himself, I think, is from a touchdown standpoint because he's a bigger, more physical receiver, and that will lend itself well in the red zone. I mean, I think it's borderline irresponsible for ESPN to project Rondale Moore with a season in which they think the Cardinals are going to be terrible, plus Colt McCoy to have a career high 737 yards. Like you're just guessing at that point. It's like every fantasy football, every podcast preview for this team that I've done this offseason, it's like Rondale Moore, wide receiver 2, talk to me about him. First of all, did anybody watch the game Friday night? 2 receiver sets did not include Rondale Moore. It was Zach Pascal and Michael Wilson. Hollywood will come back. They'll have to shift some things around. There are not going to be enough opportunities for Rondale Moore to have 700 yards in this offense. It's already going to be run dominant. I mean, like Rondale Moore in the red zone, that's not a winning recipe in my opinion. It's big tight ends like Ertz and McBride and Wilson. And then if you want to have Hollywood, Rondale Moore to me you got to prove it. You got to earn it, right? I've never seen him do that. Circa 2018 in Purdue, that's not. That doesn't. It's a half decade later.
The biggest thing
we're just taking stuff. We're just grabbing and making stuff up at ESPN. That again, I want him to do well. I want Isaiah to do well. I want these players to have success. But let's turn our brains on here. No way he's doing that. You think Rondale Moore's catching 70 balls in this offense? No way he's doing that.
I think if that's if you're trying to do an educated guess and you have this model and you run it through and you feel like, hey, we're going to give fantasy football players over at ESPN this idea that Rondale Moore is going to catch 70 balls for 700 yards.
You're
and
just not educated.
Past 2 seasons, yeah, I mean it's a little. That's
this team. It's people not paying attention to this team, and this Kyler Murray stat is the emphasis, the antithesis of it. This next one we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Cardinals franchise signal caller.
That is the biggest
2,300 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 picks, 350 yards rushing, and 3 touchdowns. Once again, per ESPN Fantasy. I mean, these numbers. I think Kyler Murray put up touchdown numbers like that in his first 6 or 7 games for the 2021 season. Like he eclipsed, I think he was at 20 touchdowns by then, total touchdowns by then. So they're expecting him, even when he's healthy, to take a massive step back production wise. And then like the 13 touchdowns, the 8 picks. I don't even think he's ever had like a ratio that close as far as touchdowns to picks. Like he takes care of the ball relatively well.
If this is what happens with Kyler Murray returning, And what is this projected over? How many games would you say this is projected over? Half a season, maybe? I would say it's about half a season.
Yeah,
This is projecting Kyler Murray to miss like 8 or 9 games.
yeah, I think that's about right.
If you're putting up those numbers in about 8 or 9 games, and we're subjected to Colt McCoy for 8 or 9 games, that's Kyler Murray's last season with the Arizona Cardinals. They're taking Caleb Williams first overall.
Yeah.
If you've got Kyler Murray almost with an equal touchdown to interception ratio for half a season, this team's winning three games and they're getting the first overall
It
pick.
looks like it's
and
close
Caleb
to about
Williams will be in
9 to
Arizona.
10. It looks like it's about 9 to 10. If you just go off his,
So it's
if
almost
he's,
half.
if he's throwing 250 yards a game, it's going to be around, and that's about his average. You
were losing 90%. Like that's them thinking Kyler's not coming back, and when he does come back, he's not going to be right, and they're going to be losing. So if you're going off of that, ESPN, which is fine because that's what ESPN and everybody else thinks is going to happen.
Watching tape on Caleb
the
Williams.
narrative.
Yeah.
But if we get one more time, producer Emma, if we get these numbers from Kyler Murray in 2023, the Cardinals are drafting Caleb Williams first overall. I don't think I think we're sleepwalking to 3,000 passing yards easily, sleepwalking, and I would not be surprised if he had 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. The rushing yards to me are irrelevant. I want him to feel comfortable as a passer in this offense. These are just flush these down the toilet. These are not relevant. These are not relevant.
If you look at Jacoby Brissett's season from last year, and Kyler is a much better quarterback, especially throwing the football than Jacoby Brissett. I mean, Brissett he started 11 games and he had 2,600 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he rushed for, 369 yards. So, I mean, that's more production from Brissett than what they're projecting for Kyler.
Kyler Murray is basically an XFL quarterback to everybody in the national media at this point. We saw our guy Will Brenton at CBS Sports put him at tier 6. Like, does anybody pay attention to what's happening? Kyler Murray's poised to come back sooner rather than later in a quarterback-friendly offense with a run game. It's like, now he's not going to be watchable. You won't even be able to consume him.
He's going to throw 2,300 yards, and 700 of those are going to Rondale Moore. And like, how is Rondale Moore going to have 700 receiving yards and Kyler Murray is only going to have 2,300? And I know he's going to have it was with whoever's playing in the meantime while Kyler Murray comes back. It doesn't make sense.